a lot of my spare time was spent listening to records and at record theater, the record stores, and that was where I was like getting hit with all these recurrences with this first love, which was like images, because I'd be flipping through the records and I'd see a beautiful record cover, like, oh, that's what I want to do.
Michael Wilson, thanks for coming in today. What a tremendous guest on a podcast called The Necessary Entrepreneur. But how this fits in with everyday lives are that the only reason why I personally became an entrepreneur, because it was necessary for me to do it for the life I wanted to live. And usually that lines up with you being such an elite photographer. It's probably given you a platform for your life that probably you look back on with massive appreciation, that you look back on and have so much happiness associated with your life for what you're able to do, right? So welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
We were just talking about how young you were.
Yes, which is not young. Yeah.
Is age just is it just a perspective? There's a big debate around this right now. Is it a number or is it just how we feel?
It has to be both. And I still feel like I'm just out of high school. But I mean, that has been my default. It's like a dog that comes into the dog park with its like tail sort of already tucked between its legs a little bit.
Yeah.
As opposed to a dog that runs in just like, I sort of always come in like, okay, is it okay to be here? And then it takes a while to get me.
And once your tail comes out though.
Then I'm fine. Yeah.
Wow, what a journey, huh? From there's a long journey before 1987, but in 1987, you dove off the deep end to be a full-time freelance and probably to be hired, whatever that's called.
Right, yeah.
Photographer. So back to 1987, that's 40 years.
Yeah, a decade before that, 77 is really sort of where I would say that was the setup for 87. Because in 1977 was my last year of high school. Most of my good energy and my interest in high school was centered on the French horn, playing music, which was really ironic to say that because I was terrible, but I was smitten with the instrument. I had friends that were in the band, and it was like it was something I would like. I loved carrying the horn around the hallway. I loved everything about it. When I should have been listening to Aerosmith and Led Zeppelin, I was listening to my 3 French horn records. So in high school, instead of like being tuned in, I was like focused on this instrument in this, what I realize now is kind of a delusional way. And I think I might have been the kind of kid that people were afraid to hurt their feelings. So like I was always, I don't know if you're familiar with the way bands and are, but there's like the first chair, second, and then there's like
a hierarchy,
last
right?
chair. Yeah, the people that play best are first chair. I was always last chair, but no, and I would never get the part. But I did, that was not a hurtful thing. I just loved being there. Like I would get so blissed out, I couldn't like make my lips make the right shape. I would just like, I don't know what that was, but it was some kind of love that. But one of my best friends in high school was took pictures for the school paper, and just hanging out his house. His father had built a darkroom in his house, and so obviously this was pre-digital. This is film age. I'd go to hang out with him. He said, I have to go in the darkroom, make a print for the paper before we go do something. So it was always just sort of like a side thought, but that was a tiny little seed that was planted, a little spark. Like I thought, well, this is cool. We go down this room, the lights are red, and he'd put some paper in some trays of liquid, and it was kind of like cool and magic. But I didn't really think about it. But I worked at a burger chef, and they don't have those anymore. But and I'd saved up money specifically to buy a French horn, which in 1977 cost $800, wow. Which was a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And I did arrive at the $800 almost at the exact moment when I realized when it dawned on me, I can't play the French horn. And that was my last year of high school. People were making plans to go to college, and it just sort of like a moment of reality set in and says, you've got $800, but you're not going to buy a French horn because you can't play it. And so my brother, who's 4 years older, came home from college and started playing guitar. And he said, man, there's a guitar I really want. It's a Martin D28. It costs $600. And I said, well, I have money. And so I loaned him $600, and he bought a Martin guitar. He still has. It sounds great. And it's worth a lot more than $600 now. But
do you own it?
My brother still owns it. He paid me back.
Did you get a vig on that $600? That's what I'm wondering. Yeah, did you get a good return on
an
interest rate?
No, I don't think
just loaned him the $600.
I've got the unending love of my brother.
Yeah.
But I had $200 left over,
yeah.
And that was a magic number because I wanted to buy. I thought I worked hard for worked at a fast food restaurant for 4 years. I needed a reward, and so I asked my friend, how much would it cost to get a camera? So I bought a camera right at the end of high school, just as kind of a luxury item. I wanted to buy something nice.
To reward yourself.
To reward myself.
For all the burger time.
And I had $200, and that was, that landed on top of a strange, fateful twist where I got called out of high school on the last day of school, and they said, do you have any plans for college? And I said, no. He said, well, if you had a scholarship to go to NKU, would you be interested? I said, sure, I guess. So I took a scholarship that nobody wanted to NKU that wound up being 4 years, full ride, which I didn't deserve because I did not have great academic grades. I was fine in English, bad in math. I didn't deserve an academic scholarship, but I was given it because of a fluke.
What was the fluke?
The fluke was nobody at our high school. NKU at that time was a commuter college. Mm-hmm. And I think they had given one of these scholarships, offered one to every high school, I think, in Cincinnati, and to encourage, And at that time, it was not really much on people's radar. At least, I went to Norwood, which is not a great school, but it was like the people that were going to college were not thinking about it. They wanted to get out of town.
Yep. So this is a photography scholarship?
No, it was an academic scholarship. It had nothing to do. I'd never taken an art class. I'd never taken a photograph.
Did no one else want to go to Northern?
No one else wanted.
Norwood.
That's why that's the fluke. Yep. No one wanted the scholarship.
From Norwood.
And they were embarrassed. On the awards assembly day, they had no one to accept this scholarship. So I got the scholarship.
So to take it back, because I'm going to pick back up on this, but you talked about the moment in the room, the way photography used to be done in the dark room.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Was that a part of photography that wasn't the photography that people liked, that was a neat part? Could that have been some of the reason that some people got into photography because of that production process?
Oh, it was, I think that's 100% yes. I mean, the actual process, just the way someone will fall in love with making ceramics, because of what's required of the process requires something. It is rewarding to touch something and then see it
appear,
see it physically appear.
Yeah.
So in that moment, when I was in my friend's art room, I wasn't longing to be a photographer at that moment, but I'm sure what you're inferring is true, that there was something magic that I picked up on that process.
Yeah. So going back to this extra $200
that you
had to buy the camera, all these fortunate moments.
They are.
Right? And so it's funny that it starts with you had $800, you had worked really hard to buy the French horn, to be a young guy, to then realize I'm not good and not spend this. And your brother happens to come home and he said, I'd love to buy this D28, this Martin, from his younger brother. Yeah. You loaned him $600. There's $200 left. If you wouldn't have loaned him the $600, you would have had more than $200. You might not have bought a camera.
That's a good, I never thought about that.
So from you performing a good deed, taking care of your brother, helping him live out his dream, it kicked off yours.
Mark, I've never thought of that.
Well, leave it up to me. I'll point something out, right? So you go to Northern on an academic scholarship.
And I had failed math in high school.
In all their brilliance, they said,
one of my other older sisters had other siblings. My sister had gone to school with my math teacher, and that meant my F became a D.
So you survived.
I survived and got an academic scholarship.
Oh, Michael was pardoned back in his day.
I've received lots of pardons.
Yeah.
And then I show up to sign up for classes at NKU, just line up, and I can't remember the man's name. At the time, he struck me as an older man. He was probably much younger than me. And he, you're signing up for classes, and he said, well, what are you interested in studying? I said, well, I wasn't planning on going to college, so I haven't really thought about this. I said, but I did just buy a camera, and so that's interesting to me. And he flips through the catalog. He was not and he says, and it turns out we have a photography major here. You could be a photo major. You would be an art major. Are you interested in art? I said, well, sure, I guess. I never had an art class, but I'm so grateful that he asked me, do I have any interests or hobbies? Because, he had said, do you want to study? What are you interested in studying? And I hadn't thought about it. And so when he asked me, well, what are you interested in? Or do you have any hobbies? I'm so grateful that led him to this discovery for him. Well, we have a photo major. And then, so I became an art major. And that led to my second semester of my freshman year, what was sort of like a pivotal moment in my life. And I think of it where, I don't know if you had an experience when you were a grade school kid where you were taken on a bus to the theater for the first time, maybe like a real theater. And you get off the bus and you're in with all these other school kids, and everybody's throwing airplanes and spit wads, and then all of a sudden the lights go down and everybody gets quiet. And the curtain, and then the curtain pulls back slowly, and everything looks different, like no world you've ever seen. It's all lit strange, and we learned how to develop film and do stuff. That was all kind of interesting. But the kicker was, I didn't realize that for 150 years, people have been making photographs just because they loved making photographs. And that was like that theater curtain pulling back, like, wow, people. And I didn't realize there was this. You see so many pictures. Even back then, pictures were ubiquitous. It's gotten harder and worse now because we're flooded with images. Mm-hmm. But I thought photographers, pictures, that's what's in the newspaper, picture. But I didn't. And when I saw, and maybe now I'm thinking as I'm talking about it, the fact that I was being shown something that was lovingly made by somebody who actually loved it mattered. And so I realized that it's okay to, be, and that's when I realized, and I went over that was a tipping point for me. Like, I want to make pictures like some of the pictures I've been seeing.
Did you ever, that registrar in the registrar's office, when you already registered for classes, I know you were registering for classes that day. Did you ever run into that same person again?
No.
Isn't that fascinating? That a moment in time, one person that wasn't planned, that you probably had a 15 to 30 minute interaction with, set you on a course for your life.
Another thing I've never thought about. Thank you. Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. You still have to choose, but they get us started sometimes. I had a similar experience when I was taking night classes at Thomas More. And I was taking non-traditional classes. They were the only school in Northern Kentucky, even in Cincinnati back then, where I could take non-traditional classes. I did college differently. I went for a full year, then I went away and traveled and worked, and then I came back. And I had to get enough credits at NKU to get into a TAP program at Thomas More. And that was because I was working a full-time job, and I wanted to take night classes. And there was an adjunct professor there. I was getting ready to quit my job. I was just burnt out, wasn't inspired anymore, early 20s. And he heard me say something. He said, "What do you think you're going to do?" I said, "I have no idea." Maybe that's your moment when you went to college, right? Mm-hmm. So I was a 24-year-old kid. That's not too different than an 18-year-old kid. And I said, "I have no idea." I said, "What do you think I should do?" So just from my question to him, "What do you think I should do?" He said, "Man, you seem like you'd be really good in commission sales." And I went, "Commission sales? Everyone always said that to me. What do you mean?" And he said, "I don't know, maybe go get your real estate license." It's like that moment. It's a similar moment, right? That you're sitting there and you're like, "I don't know." And the guy asked you, "What are you interested in?" But someone can come up with a novel idea for us in our life, but we have to do something with it. Mm-hmm. So then that's the next stage here, that you did something with it. Yeah. And then you were in the presence of the photography instructor. Yeah. and pulled back the curtain for you.
Yeah.
And you realized this is something that I could really, really, really enjoy. It was fascinating to you.
Yeah, and it was. Yeah, that was a. There's not a lot of moments of real confidence in my life. I'm not a super, but that is, I know that I love this. You know, I know that, and when I'm walking with a camera, I still know that. I may be confused about how to make a living at it or who cares about it, but when I'm out with a camera, just walking, like, oh, this is what I do.
So what from 77 to 87?
Yeah.
From when you go and start college to 87, what's that 10-year decade look like?
I was that dog in the dog park that all of a sudden realizes that I'm welcome here, and I was surrounded. It was a great moment. I lived right across the suspension bridge all through college. I lived in a building called the Medicus, which was like a warehouse building, where that high-rise Ascent is now. And but it was this crazy warehouse, and lived there with like 4 other photographers. We had a darkroom in there, and it would be like if you were in a band and lived with your bandmates, and everybody would just so into it.
It's almost like you lived in a laboratory for photography every day.
And it was so that you picked up their energy. You wanted to make pictures as good as they were making. It was a great environment. So those 4 years of college were like that. Since I was a fine art major, no sort of practical application for the photography. The career path would have been, well, go to higher education, get a master's degree, and you can pursue a course of teaching. And I thought, well, I never thought of myself as a teacher. I also was curious. I wasn't sure. Well, if I'm not being required to make these pictures, I love making pictures, I know that. But if no one's demanding me to have 20 prints in a month for a critique, will I still do it? Will I still make pictures if there's not a teacher saying these are due this day? And I was really, that's one thing I remember, like, I'm curious, will I do this if no one's requiring me to do this?
You actually had that thought.
I did have that thought. So that's why I decided not to go to any higher education. I thought, do I really love photography as much as I think I do? And
so something inside of you wanted to prove it to yourself.
Yes. Eventually, I got a job in a darkroom lab doing lab work at UC.
So you were doing those jobs to make enough money to survive to allow you to continue to follow the path of what you loved.
Yes. It was what I was constantly in pursuit of. Whether it was taking, whether that meant like as soon as work's over, I'm getting my camera and I'm walking for 3 hours and then I'm coming. I don't think it was like that, but it was what I was focused on.
You were intentional about the thought of it all the time.
Yes.
What were you doing on weekends? Were you doing photography things? Like what would happen? Would you take little side gigs? Would people hire you? Would you freelance at all?
At that point, no, not so much side gigs or freelancing. I wound up getting the darkroom job at UC led to a darkroom job at a book publisher in Cincinnati that was a textbook publisher. That was a full-time job. I got a full-time job. It was a pivotal moment, but a pivotal not because I chose it, because I found myself in a place where I'm not sure that this is working. Like, there's a problem here. In a sense, I was like living out, I was making a living by being a photographer. Of course, I was doing the processing for someone else's photographs and assisting and so I wasn't necessarily shooting a lot, but I was making my living through photography, full-time living.
Did you figure out you were going to have to do that to be able to? It wasn't working the other way. Is that what was that intentional, or the job just came upon you? Had to be looking for it.
Yeah, I think I must have been aware that like a job in a darkroom is going to be sort of more in line with what I'm wanting to do than a job as the janitor.
Yep.
But when I found the full-time job as a photographer, there's like, wow, my interest in photography is being killed. I am like not, this is like working, I was finding myself drained, losing interest in making pictures. What it was like, I was in an environment where the pictures that were asked, were required for that, where it was photography, but it was not photography that was related to anything I cared about in photography.
It's like we're making textbooks, right?
Yes,
you were doing that and you're working in dark rooms. And so there was no passion behind the subject matter at all.
Right. In the middle of that stretch of time when I was fully employed in the job that I was growing disillusioned with as a photographer, I also got married. And I think just having another soul to live with, somebody that could actually, where you have conversations with, you articulate. I'm sure now, I don't think I've ever said this, but I have to think that was really important, because that probably sped up like the thinking like, well, this is not sustainable. But if this is not sustainable, what is the option? And my wife was, so in 85, we got married. We're getting close to 87. And during those 2 years of our first 2 years of our marriage, she probably heard me complain. I also had a really good friend who was an illustrator. I would spend all my spare time in the record stores, because after I gave up the French horn, I fell really beyond pictures. My main love was music, listening to records. I got way into the whole, that was the time of, Bruce Springsteen, the Talking Heads. I got really interested in punk, and so music became my passion. And I would spend interesting, you asked in my spare time. A lot of my spare time was spent listening to records and at record theater, the record stores. And that was where I was like getting hit with all these recurrences with this first love, which was like images, because I'd be flipping through the records and I'd see a beautiful record cover, like, oh, that's what I want to do. Wow, somebody gets to do that. And I'm working at a job that I'm just loving to complain about. Like, I take pictures of people like holding a pencil correctly, like, wow, somebody gets to do that and I have to do this. So I was feeling very sorry for myself, and I had a friend who had said, well, have you ever told anybody you want to do this? And I said, no, it never occurred to me that you could tell somebody that there's something you want to do. Let me give you a little story. So if I spend an hour in a record store and there were 5 record covers that jumped out at me like, wow, that's beautiful. I would look on the back. The beautiful thing about LPs in those days, most of the credits were on the back. You could read who played bass, where was it recorded, but you also see who was the photographer or the designer, who was the art director. And I would see this one name keep popping up on records that I pulled out, and they'd have different photographers, different kinds of covers, different kinds of music, but this name kept popping up, and it was Jeri Heiden. And I didn't, as the art director, and I thought, wow, something about the things that she has her name attached to are things that I love, like. And my friend, the illustrator, says, well, have you ever thought about just like sending her something? And that also never occurred to me, that you could just reach out to somebody. Mm-hmm. So I found out that she worked at Warner Brothers Records in Los Angeles, and I had actually maybe a couple of the pictures that are behind us. I don't know if any of them are, but it's from a few from the same time period. I printed about 10 or 12 of those, and my wife bound them together into a book, a handmade book. And I sent it to this name that I knew, Jeri Heiden. And
did you write a note?
Yeah, just that I'd seen that, when I'm in the record store, I just admire your work, and these are some of my pictures. And I didn't know what my expectations were. If I had them, I would have been afraid to. I don't think I could have articulated. But I got a note back from her. This was pre-email. I got a note back from her, and to me that was a reward. But then a few days later, I got a call from a manager of a band called the Bodines, and saying, we're going to be playing at Miami University in Oxford, and Jeri Heiden suggested that we reach out to you about doing some pictures. And this and so I said yes, and then the record company called. And that was, I don't know if they do this anymore, but that was what's called shooting on spec, where you do the shoot, they'll pay your expenses. But,
do they only pay you then if they buy the image, if they use the image?
Exactly, yeah.
Wow.
It's like a trial. You know,
Yeah.
it's a-
Yeah.
So, and I shot them, and those pictures of that band wound up being used in their record they were working on.
So you were willing to do the work and not get paid. You were
yeah.
willing.
Oh yeah, I would. Yeah, yeah. And in those days, I was I knew, you know, there was already overlap between my love of music and love of pictures, because I was photographing any musicians I could. You know,
So it's
just
like a
for free.
no-brainer is what you're saying. Well,
Yeah.
of course I would
Yeah,
do
yeah,
this.
yes.
I'd pay to be able to do this
Yes,
almost.
Yes, yeah. To be around people that are doing what I most
You love.
aspire to. Music, you know, like
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a no-brainer.
How
So,
far was it between from the time when you wrote her the note and you and your wife bound your photos that you sent it to her,
Mm-hmm.
that then you received the note back or then the call?
I received a note.
Pretty
that
quick?
was a short period, yeah.
Couple weeks?
Within a week or two, I got a note back from her after I'd sent because the book was sent to her unsolicited,
Mm-hmm.
and then was probably within a week or two that the manager reached out to me, having been given my name.
There's a lesson in there about timing, about being front of mind awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I talk to people in business all the time about this, that you can create the right timing, but what you have to do is you have to knock on enough doors, make enough phone calls, so that when it's the right time for all those people, your name's going to come up.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be aware. So because what happened was, somewhere in that vicinity of you writing that note and her responding, it occurred to her, because that probably didn't happen that often, the approach you took. A lot of people would probably write a note and say, I love your photos, thanks for this, but you actually sent her your work.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone probably came to her needing something for this band at Miami, and she's like, well, this guy's in Cincinnati.
Exactly so.
He just sent me this. I give him a shot. And it might have been, there was no one else that she knew in Cincinnati.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it probably wasn't a big enough job for her to come out for it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure it wasn't.
Right?
Yeah. No, it was like
You need to be top of mind, and that's the reason why it's important for a volume of touches to matter. So whether you're a photographer, whether you want to be a musician, whether you want to be in business and in sales, you need to go find the people you need to talk to that are in control, that can hand you opportunities to stay top of mind aware. You didn't know it. It just happened for you that you took action, and thankfully that you had a wife around you that cared to push in, nudge you a little bit too. A good friend and a good wife.
Yeah.
Those two people.
Yeah.
We keep having these moments that individual humans in your life were important.
So yes,
They were
that's
catalysts.
That's it. And then, you know, this is not what you want to hear on an entrepreneurial
Yes, it
show,
is.
but okay.
Because we all have to jump
So
off.
the reason I quit the job at the book publisher, where I had a steady job, by this time I'm married, and the last actual recurring payment in my life beyond rent was a truck, and I'd paid off my truck, and I knew, I had realized I want to try to go freelance. And what was holding me back, I thought, was like, well, I need to be able to make my truck payments. And my wife had moved back from New York. She lived in New York for 4 years, and she was working temporary jobs. And that's one of the beautiful things I feel grateful about Cincinnati, is that it's a place where you, if you have modest means, there's still places you can put roots down here. And we had low overhead. She could work Olston temporary jobs, and we could make rent, and I could pursue a freelance career, which for the first 2 years was me walking around fairly lost, knocking on doors of graphic designers, saying I'm a photographer, you know, whatever. How do I?
But maybe you were fortunate to not have too much of a specific plan, because I see a lot of people make those that they don't work anyway.
Yeah. Here's what's interesting. It's like you asked what year this was. This was been about 1990, right around 1990.
Wow, 3 years of a starving artist.
And I had, so these 3 years, first 2 or 3 years of freelance, going door to door in Cincinnati, trying to find work. And this is, and it was probably much easier then than it is now, because photography was still analog, film based. So there were less photographers, because there was at least a hurdle of, like, you had to at least have the equipment and the skills. It all comes down to just like,
there was a barrier to entry in the business still.
Thank you. There was.
Yeah.
And so that meant there were fewer photographers
professional.
vying for the assignments.
Yeah.
It's much harder nowadays, because anyway, but that barrier was there. So I was, but even so, I was still fairly lost, and I was not specialized. I didn't do like tabletop work or certain things that I knew. People knew that, oh, well, you're good at portraits, you're good at people, but we don't have a lot of need for that. Whatever. Over those 2 years, I took the best of my work I'd been hired to do in those first few years of freelance. And in those days, you would laminate it in heavy plastic, and you would maybe have a nice box or a portfolio, and you would impress your potential client by sort of like walking into their office and they flip through
here's my work and what I'm capable of.
Here's what I'm capable of.
Yeah.
And so I built one of those portfolios. Very different than the first book I'd sent, which was just like, this is something I love. I'm sending it to you. I built my case for myself as a professional, and I laminated these things. I took a non-paying job to shoot a heavy metal gospel band in California.
What a combination!
Yeah, there was a lot of them.
Were there? And they were all in
90s.
California?
Well, no, they're everywhere. But a friend knew of these people and was designing their thing. So I said, well, if you pay for my airfare, I'll do it for you. And for me, what it was a chance to actually have a one-on-one visit with this Jeri Heiden with my portfolio, which was a huge mistake. So I take the job, I shoot the band. They was in San Diego. I drive up to LA and I go into the offices at Warner Brothers in Burbank. What I didn't realize was this Jeri Heiden is the head of the whole art department. At that time, it was a big operation, probably like a dozen designers. And it was a world away from Norwood, Ohio. It was like this beautiful building and these beautiful courtyard tropical plants, but I'm walking through the hallways and I'm seeing in these designers' offices posters that are actually hearkening back to why I fell in love with photography in the first place. There'd be like a poster from one of the great photographers from like the 19th century hanging in there. This is like they're referencing the very things that I loved initially. But I'm walking in now and I have a sit-down meeting with Jeri Heiden. She's very polite. And I hand her my portfolio. And she said, and there's next to me is a table, not unlike this table, and there's a box of photographs, 11 by 14 photographs. And she says, oh, feel free to look at those while I'm looking at your work. Those are by Herb Ritz. He just shot Madonna for us, and we're working on her cover. So I'm looking at these, and Herb Ritz, I don't know if you know, but in the photography world, he died in 2002, but he was one of the most important fashion photographers,
ever.
Yeah, Herb Ritz, the big name. Anyway, so I'm sitting here looking at Herb Ritz photographs of Madonna, and Jeri Heiden is looking through the laminated pictures I'd done for the Catholic Messenger, St. Anthony Messenger, and these things that have nothing to do with but they were laminated and I'd been paid for them. So I thought that's what she needed to see.
It wasn't.
Fortunately, she said to me, is there anything else you can show me? And I wasn't going to show her, but I had a bunch of personal work for a book that I was working on at the time that I still haven't finished. And I said, well, they're just pictures I've made for myself, though. And I wasn't going to show them. I was meeting a friend to show them.
And she knew.
And
she knew those were important.
She said, well, I'd like to see them. And sure enough, one of those pictures was a picture I'd made in Newport, Kentucky of two dogs standing in the streets, raining. And she pulled it out, and she called in one of the other designers who had been assigned to do a cover for a band called The Replacements, which was a punk, kind of a rough-edged band out of Minneapolis that had a kind of a cult following. And she called in the designer who's in charge of the project, says, have you hired a photographer to shoot The Replacements? And she said, yeah, we've booked Diego Uitel, a photographer in LA. And Jeri Heiden said to me, I'm so thankful, said, well, why don't you just send Michael to Minneapolis instead? And based on, and that one of those, she pulled out about 3 or 4 of these personal pictures. one of them became the cover of the record. It was a record called All Shook Down. It was their last record. And that was opened a lot of doors because that record got a lot of attention in the music business, the design world. Didn't sell a lot, but among record design, it received some awards and things.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you like these types of conversations, be sure to follow The Necessary Entrepreneur on your favorite platform so you never miss out on future content.
You initially said the meeting with her was a mistake.
Yeah.
But it turned out not to be.
It turned out not to be. What I thought I was expected to provide for her, that was the mistake.
So what's the lesson, though? Is there a lesson that we can take away?
The lesson is, I think there's twofold, and it's like the only thing. I don't have good advice for young photographers, but this much I know is you need to know what you love, truly love, not just what you're capable of doing. Because you can be capable, and I had advice to me as an early photographer. There's, in this town, you got to be versatile. You got to be able to do tabletop. You got to be able to do this. Well, and I wasn't really good at it, but I knew the kind of pictures I really loved making, and I think that and
is it because the ones that you love, you end up doing them better?
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, there's life in them. They are. And there's lots of things that don't require. There's lots of things in this world that don't require life for the box to be ticked. You need a picture of a bar of soap. It doesn't have to be passionate. Maybe what I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm over that. But the second part is pay attention to where the work that is similar to what you love, the work that makes your heart go pity pat. Pay attention to where you see that out in the wild. Where is that in the world? Oh, that's the stuff that makes you like either maybe a little twinge of jealousy or oh, that's where you find yourself. That's where I want to be. That's,
Yeah. So some of these, you have all sorts of photography. There are, you have album covers, you photograph musicians, you photograph landscapes, everyday people. But with some of the musicians, since that's your passion in addition to photography, some of them that I looked back on, did you get to listen to the albums before you shot for the covers?
Used to be that was a par for the course, that you would be sent like a demo, often like it was a cassette tape. You would hear just so you could get the feel. I came into doing record covers near the end of the life of the heyday, but in that time when everything was running on all those cylinders, it was a system. You would get a pre-release, you would hear it, so you could get the feel of the record.
But there's more recent ones than then. Like for example, you did Jason Isbell's Southeastern.
Yes,
that image seems to perfectly depict the music from that album.
I think when my pictures are best, they're very direct, and I think in that record he was like at a very direct time. He'd come out of he'd been sober for about a year at that time, maybe a year or two, and it was like a very important sort of turning point, record, and he just leveled with the camera in a certain way.
So what's our excuse for John Hiatt's Crossing Muddy Waters? Because that seems similar. It seems like that image.
I think the answer to all of these will, with a few exceptions, like behind us, there's a Lyle Lovett record that is very different. But in most of the cases, when the pictures I do work and feel fitting to the music, it's because someone just realized that my work has a certain sort of quality to it at its best. I mean, it's a known entity. Their music has a certain quality to it, and these are two things. Like somebody says, "This makes sense. These pictures."
So you think this is like a casting director role? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That they take your skill and your ability and what your outcome is, and they're matching it up?
Yeah. And that used to be the role of art directors, to match those. And that Jeri Heiden was an art director. That was somebody, this is a good
with the
fit
replacements. Send him to Minneapolis.
Yeah.
It's the reason why she was the director.
Yeah. It's gotten harder. Now, younger photographers, I think, are dealing with a different situation, because more often than not now, it's like There is not that. It's like every band knows probably one or two sort of really gifted photographers in their circle of friends. There's not someone that with a little perspective saying this fit is a good fit for
Got
this.
it.
Anyway, but I will give you an example relative to John Hiatt in a more recent, because I've done, I think 3 or 4 of John's records. The most recent one, he actually came to Cincinnati for, and I remember a phone call. What do they call this? Phone calls when there's more one people.
Too many people on the call. That's what it is. Too many opinions.
Yeah, it was.
But you merged it. It was a group call with Zoom. It was something.
It was a group call.
Yeah.
With his management, somebody from the record company, leading up to like this photo shoot, and they had asked me like, well, Michael, what kind of locations have you got in mind? What you like? If we're going to pay you, we want to know what we're getting. What are we getting? And that's and I'm always a bad one for that. Cause
delves into like, get off my creative bus. I'm on this thing, right?
Fortunately, in that case, I was, I'm not a kind of a bold voice, but at a certain point they're asking and saying, well, what are your thoughts? Where do you want John to be? And then John, who had been quiet just on the call, says, hey, I've got an idea. He says, what if I drive up to Cincinnati and I meet up with Michael and we just see what happens?
That's
I'm so grateful. And because like that ended all their like, sort of question, like, well, where are you going to take him? Like, what are your, do you need assistance? Or like, it's
the
like,
creative Michael didn't like all that, did he?
No. And I've, there were a few years when my work was more popular where I would get calls from people that didn't really know my work, but because I'd done maybe an artist that they recognized that was in the genre, like a Lyle Lovett. Well, we have another artist that's roughly in that genre. We'd like to maybe hire you. And they didn't really want me. What they wanted was, I don't know what they wanted. They wanted some association with another artist. And I would be called in and to like photo shoots. And I did not have the wisdom at the time to say, I'm not the right person with it. I remember even one shoot photographing Loretta Lynn's daughters who had a record coming out. And I was getting ready to drive down for the shoot, and somebody from the record company said, great, we're looking forward to it. It was going to be over 2 days down in Nashville. And they said, do you have, who are you bringing with you? Who are your assistants? And I said, well, I don't have any assistants. And they said, oh, that's not going to work. So you have to have an assistant. And I guess it was all part of this like dog and pony show.
Yep.
Like there are trailers, there's hair and makeup people. And I brought my dad had retired. He was an asbestos worker, but he loved country music. So I don't know what I was thinking. But I said, so I brought my dad with me. All he did was sort of like chat people up the whole time, but like at least I had an assistant.
And you probably got paid for having an assistant too.
Awesome.
So, and then also the last one, a local musician here to Northern Kentucky just recently did a 10-year anniversary for an album cover you did for Jeremy Pinnell. Yeah. And that perfectly also, the album is Ohio and Kentucky. Mm-hmm. He has a tattoo of Ohio and Kentucky on either side. That image, it really depicts that music in that album.
I think that would be going back to what we talked about earlier, and also maybe resonant with like your thoughts about the Jason Isbell and the John Hiatt. It's like these are Jeremy, all the artists you've just mentioned are people who are digging for something that's actually rooted in their music. And my pictures, if they work, they've hit something sort of hopefully rooted, genuine, that trustworthy.
Yeah, it feels right.
I just want to put a disclaimer on myself. There's also kinds of music that my work was totally inappropriate for. Like,
for example,
somebody like that's a pop star, or like a Madonna, somebody that is where it's about an image, where there's like we are creating an aura.
You want to document, you don't want to create.
Thank you. Yes, I'm not there to build something up. I'm here to like sort of
capture what is.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated, but I want to talk about some of these. You brought up Lyle Lovett.
Yeah, that's a bit of an outlier.
That's wild. Why is that an outlier?
Oh, in terms of like me just sort of like responding to a person in a certain kind of light. this was, and I've worked with, I have a long history with Lyle, for which I'm really grateful. I've done all his covers since 1992 we first met, and Joshua Judges Ruth. I did all the inside pictures, not the cover, and he's a really strong man of his word. Anyway, but so he had promised that another photographer would do that cover, and he kept his word. But from there on out, I've done all this. But that was for a record called Release Me. It was his last record on an sort of an unhappy relationship with a record company. So it was like a bit of a jab at the record company. But there's also the song, please release me, let me go.
He was telling me they were number one, with even the album name.
So
that was saying he's all bound up and release me. Is that indicative
exactly
of that?
So, and but that idea was being explored when I work with him. It usually happens over a series of days, and it's basically hanging out. Unusual because most of the people just want to be done with the photo session. And I'm fine with that because being photographed is not an enjoyable thing for most of us. But Lyle tends to we'll come to Texas, we'll spend a few days. I've got these places to go, and we'll take some pictures. So this is in the course of a few days, and we went up to where he was training some horses because he loves horses, and we were in Oklahoma, and it was this weird. There had been the beginning of a housing development, so they graded some land. It was flat out there, but they'd made streets, but then it had gone. It was
overgrown. They didn't build
dormant.
on it.
It was it was I don't know if it probably by now it may have been, but and it was adjacent to the ranch where he was training, and he had said, well, Michael, one thing, there's these maybe I could have one of the really big cowboys like with arms holding me and we tried different things, and then he saw somebody doing something with rope earlier in that day when he was out working with the horses, and he said, Michael, won't you try so he had somebody wrap him up with rope, and we made some pictures, and then I had said, Lyle, we really need to do some pictures because he was busy the whole day. So we took just maybe about half an hour, and the light was the end of the day, and he put on his suit because he hadn't been wearing his suit, and he said, well, let's try the rope thing again. So we went out to this, and it was very desolate. I think what makes it work is it's makes no sense. You're in this desolate place. There's a man in an Armani suit standing there, and
with an awesome watch on, probably. The watch is probably expensive.
Yeah, and he cares about things, and so I don't care about things so much. So and he knows that, so he knows he has to be careful around me. So he says, so it's just me and him, and he said, let's try the rope. So I again wrap, and he got, Michael, don't let the rope drag the dirt because this is my good suit, my stage suit, So he was so I had to be very careful.
But it's dragging the dirt.
Well, at the end there, I can eventually, but because when I was first started doing it, but
he cares as much about the photography as he does about the music. It seems.
And I'm really grateful. He loves. You had talked about individuals, how they play in your life. There was a time when in this last year where it occurred to me, all along I've been thinking, well, what's important about what I do is the physicality of my work, what my pictures look like, whatever, how they've been used. But what I'm realizing, what really and this goes back to the Lyle thing, is the real important thing has been the time I've spent with these people. The actual time with the people is, I think, really what my work has been about. And that's what I love that there is an artifact. There's a picture that may be associated with the time in their life.
What really matters is relationships.
Yeah.
It matters in every part of life. In business and personal life, that the deeper, the stronger, the more committed the relationships, friendship, interpersonal relationships, the better the outcome.
Yeah.
Because you get to a moment when there's such a level of trust and commitment, it can just be free and it can naturally happen. You can document reality versus trying to make it up and make it happen. Yeah. What do you look back on over these 40 years? And there's these images behind you because you just had a book recently come out. I mean, you brought a cover for us to have here, and I looked it up online and I went, Michael, that's a $600 book.
Yeah.
This guy must be really good at photography.
No,
that's impressive.
Well,
that is.
The price tag on that is because it's kind of like
Don't
a
sell
little
yourself
more rarer than a book. It's a portfolio, so it's like it's a limited edition. It's an edition of 100. So and they're all signed and numbered prints, archival prints. So it was. Yeah, I wish it was a book in some ways because it would be more democratic, easier to get around to people. But it is. But the price tag isn't maybe. Yeah.
Maybe it should be $6,000 if it's a life's work.
Well, and it's just a part of life, but it's an beautiful. Now here's an interesting thing, and I did this beautiful coincidence about the portfolio. It wound up being designed by Jeri Heiden and her husband John, the same woman who I'd first reached out to. Like she was the one that was hired by None Such Records in New York to design the portfolio. So.
Boy, that's a
nice
full circle. That's closing the gap.
Yeah.
Are there moments that stick out on the people that you photographed that felt different? That felt like this is an impactful moment? That felt like maybe it was a life moment for that individual or you too? Yeah. Or are you just capturing that for us? Because looking at all of these, and if you go into your portfolio, I look at these, and like this picture of this guy right here.
Yeah, Alan Toussaint, who's a really important New Orleans musician.
That's left for me to think, what's he thinking?
I'm very aware of how the moment feels and how it feels to be in this space with this person. Whether that's, yes, this is the right place to be, or boy, this feels really bad. Beyond that, I don't think I've ever been able to get out of that moment to like, wow, this is a special moment. I've had moments when I've been out with a camera, when I've been photographing, and I'm not around people when I've had like realized that, wow, I am so lucky to just be able to be alive and looking at this
landscape moment.
Yeah, being able to live, just to like breathe the air and do that I'm just so grateful. But
you're in your mind trying to create this moment in a photograph. You don't necessarily know what's happening for them.
Exactly. And it's funny, I teach portrait workshops sometimes, and I tell people that I'm terribly unobservant when it comes to, like, I won't know if somebody's buttoned their shirt wrong or their hair's out of place. I won't notice anything like that. What I'll notice is like how comfortable or uncomfortable they are, or like how the light. I notice how the light's falling. I notice how the vibe in the room. But other than that, I go on to sort of like some sort of.
Do you go into a zone?
Yeah, it's a zone. I think it is.
And you've probably done it so often that the zone, everything just works right. You click.
Well, it can work right, but it does. There's no guarantee that it will. I make a lot of bad pictures.
Yeah.
There are people that are very disappointed with my pictures. So.
Do you not show those? Do we keep those put away somewhere?
They're not on my portfolio, but other people don't show them either. So.
How many photos do you think you take to get one great image? So take any of these images. How many do you think you took?
My bottom line answer is that to photographers that you don't have to take a lot of pictures. On the Lyle Lovett record, that was a shoot that lasted over, on the record where that was the cover for, there might have been a couple other pictures. I mean, let's say there are 4 pictures used. Out of 3 or 4 days of shooting, color, black and white, these days I shoot digital, it could easily be between 300 and 500, 600 pictures.
To get. What's important about that process that gets you here? Are you learning something in all those moments, or is it just yes or no? Are you just constantly saying no until you happen upon the moment? Or are you slightly, through all the failures and losses, are you slightly getting to this moment?
There is a movement in a certain direction, in that towards a more...
There's a path.
The
path forms?
Yeah, and yes, it does. The path forms as you start walking, but I will say, conversely, that some of the pictures here you see, especially when I photograph strangers, I may only take 3 or 4 clicks of a shutter, and I would say that the nature of the encounters is one of the reasons why you have to make a lot of pictures. Like if you're being hired to make a picture for a record cover, because, and I might have mentioned this earlier, that
Try to force an outcome.
you're dealing with expectations. Well, there's not just expectations for a record cover that we don't know what that's going to look like. There's also expectations. Well, we'll also need publicity. We'll also need magazines. And then there's expectations. Well, he's been wearing the same shirt the whole shoot. We need some with some different, So
you're trying to create instead of document again.
Yeah, and
right.
so those kind of like artificial sort of
productions.
Yeah, those matter if you're going to get do it for money. The portrait encounter is very strange because it is this manufactured moment where the desired outcome isn't what feels like an organic, unforced moment. So you create this, you enter into a forced, non-organic moment to hopefully arrive at. So it requires a lot of it's like carving through a chunk of wood to get to okay, well here's the.
And sometimes it takes a lot longer to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. That pressure is not always fun to operate in, right?
No.
Yeah, because you're paid to do a job. You have X amount of time. I'm sure Lyle doesn't have endless days to give you. Yeah. He has a schedule he's trying to live up to. I think there was one here too of, I thought I saw an image of John Prine or something.
Right.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, he's not with us anymore. He passed during COVID, I think, right? Something about his music. It's an Americana type of music, right? It goes in line with some of the music that you share. I'm sure you liked his music. You loved his music.
I loved his music.
Yeah. Where was that image? That's actually not too long ago. That's a recent image.
Fairly recent. It was in Nashville. It was on the outskirts. In Nashville, you probably know this, being in the business you are, it's like changes so fast. It changes every week. But at this time, he had he kept a writing studio near on the side of town where there were some stockyards, had been stockyards. So this was there, and after this was actually outside in one of the sort of like some tunnel going down into the. It was in, and he was very game. He had he was a sweet. That was a treat. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's in Nashville, and I had shot him actually for a British music magazine, and so that was fun because way more. Open-ended, loose. There's no none of the things I just described where we need some publicity, we need some the change of clothes. It's just like
that looks like a good heartfelt image.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
I'll take that.
The pain of a rocker. I tell you what, huh?
Well,
there's pain in that photo. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I don't know. Robert Plant, I don't think he feels a lot of pain.
But there's depth there.
I'm sure he's seen some things.
Yeah, I'm sure, right? Yeah. Is that what's coming out of his eyes? All the things he's seen. He's like,
Can I let you down?
Yeah, let me down.
Okay. When I see that picture, what I remember is like we were in a recording studio in Nashville, and a friend of mine named Buddy Miller, who's also there, was producing. He was in the band. So Buddy is the one that connected. So I went down, and I just look at that. I'm always just sort of like, where is there light to make a picture? And this was like a windowless recording studio. So I just remember opening.
There was light coming in from a window there?
No window. Oh. I opened a door. It was winter, but it was Nashville, so it wasn't that cold, and made him sit in a hallway. In a dark hallway with an open door.
So the look on his face was like, oh, you.
It may have been. He certainly was concerned about recording songs, not getting a picture made.
Yeah.
But I do love he gave himself to the moment, though.
Yeah. He's saying you again, Michael.
No.
You again, this door. Shut the door. This older couple here.
Yeah.
Is that just in a moment? Who is that?
Yeah, I have no idea. I just that's me just being sort of curious. At the world.
Love those because I'm like, what is going on in that conversation?
Yeah,
right.
I know. Well, I can tell you that it was taken at one of those like symphony in the parks, and I see he's got his transistor radio. Yep. So he would rather not be there. He's probably listening to the Reds. He was listening to the Reds game.
Yep. And he's wondering, what have you done to me? And she's like, just enjoy the moment,
She's trying
right?
to get cultured, and he's like, let's listen to the Reds game.
And then there's stories of animals like speaking to their human friend.
Yeah, no, there are animals. I got a great animal. So this Buddy Miller picture behind you, that's him and Jim Lauderdale. They still have a radio show called Buddy and Jim. Anyway, but what's so funny is like there were these little dog houses in Buddy's backyard that Buddy's wife had put out there for some reason. I don't know why, because they don't have dogs. But she put out, the first time I photographed Buddy, I'm going to tell you about animals. So the first, and Buddy Miller is not necessarily a household name, but a great musician, great guitar player. He plays with Emmylou Harris a lot. And anyway, Buddy is one of those people. That was one of the few times where I had actually solicited, like, I told somebody in Nashville, like, if Buddy Miller ever makes a record, I would love to be considered. And I don't usually do that. And it happened. He was on a small independent label, and I went to his house, and he and his wife Julie, they're both really gifted, but Julie's a card, and we'd spent the morning photographing, and then a door opened, and Julie came out. She didn't realize there was a photo session going on in the house, and she says, "Oh, this is so embarrassing." She said, and so what I didn't realize was that she got all the cats. There must have been about 3 or 4 of them, and she got them all back in the bedroom. And then the door opened 5-10 minutes later, and she opened and says, "This is better." And I forget what she actually said, but what she was embarrassed about, the cats did not have on their clothes. So she addressed the cats. So
I'll tell you what, the lives that some people get to live, huh?
And she was just like, she did this beautiful, and her songwriting is amazing.
Good soul, a good human. Boy, a man in his instrument, huh?
Yeah, that's a great guitarist named Bill Frisell. The very earliest picture I did for this we talked about the None Such portfolio, which is a 25-year survey of portraits I've done for them. I've done about 60 or so projects with them over the years, but they picked out 20 of the artists that were sort of most important to their history as part of their anniversary, their 60th anniversary. And he was the earliest one I shot for that. Not this picture, but this picture I shot, I used to have a studio in Camp Washington here in town, and photographed him there. But
an old brick building with original wood floors, and wow.
Yeah, beautiful windows facing north, where uninterrupted light.
See, those are the things that we were discussing a little bit when you first stopped in today about, hey, what are one of the 2 important things, or are there thousands? See, there's all these little moments.
Yeah.
Are there a couple of those that really stand out that what you just spoke to?
Yeah, it's light. I mean, it's all photographers do is just respond to light. It's so like, and when you see how the light behaves on a face, how the light, how that is the light on a subject relative to the light on the background, because like it's not just the light on your subject, it's like what's around it, and then that comes to like the elements in the and like there's a picture behind you of it was taken on Ray Street, right across the street from Shillitoe's in Cincinnati, and I was living downtown at the time, but and there's trash on the ground, and all these things become part of the picture, and sometimes you want to, welcome in all that sort of bric-a-brac, like the strange dog houses.
And sometimes you don't behind her, right?
Yeah, sometimes you want nothing but just the light.
And like the older couple sitting there, that's just all the light. Do you see it now? Is your mind so skilled that you walk into a moment and you see it what it needs to be?
I definitely see light. I'm always on the hunt for light. I'm always when I get asked to make pictures, though, it can be very frustrating, because what I'm longing for is it's not omnipresent. I love to be moved by things I see and hear. I love to be reminded that, like, it's lucky to be alive. Like I get to hear this. I get to hear this sound. I get to see this sight, and maybe that's what all that photographers, artists, musicians do, is like they just want to sort of like get close to that stuff.
Do you have a hero?
Many. If I would send people home to look at like terms of portraiture, August Sander, a great German photographer that was active up until the 30s into the 40s. Hitler kind of put the kibosh on him, but the photographers, Irving Penn and Richard Avedon, so many. And like the thing is like these names that I call out as heroes, the world just feels so rich that it feels unfair to start naming names. But yeah, for me, I still remember the moment. Early in the conversation, we talked about how that moment when the curtain was being pulled back when I was learning the history. I still remember a film strip. I don't know if anybody still remembers those, but there'd be a cassette and a film strip, and it would beep, and the cassette would play, and then you would next slide. And there was a conversation with a photographer named Bruce Davidson, who was still alive, and I was seeing his work and hearing him talk, and it felt like every time that beeped and the next slide came up, it felt like somebody was putting a rock on my chest, like, oh, this is what like. And so Bruce Davidson would be a hero, if nothing else, just because I associate him with that moment. But Robert Frank, I just saw his pictures in New York last week. There's too many to name. Yeah.
Maybe they've been more important at different moments too.
Exactly. That's a good point. Yeah, there are people that we need at certain times.
Yeah, and they impact us individually. What's a setting? So you've done landscapes. Mm-hmm. What's a setting that you've been significantly impacted? Like, without me being a photographer, we all kind of are now in weird ways. We're not professional like you, but we are now.
Yes.
I have so many images on this iPhone. Mm-hmm. And then even though you're not going to get in and mess with Adobe and do all those types of things, but the novice now has access to create things. I don't know what you think or feel about that, but I see these moments of like Iceland, the Blue Lagoon. There's the geyser at Yellowstone. We all know those, but is there a moment that's been one or two landscapes that's really setting to you that maybe we don't know, that's been most impactful, that's been inspiring? You can go back to that moment.
I'm going to say no, but there's a project, something that I've been longing to photograph and want to photograph and find a way to photograph, and that is about this area. Like, I've been trying to find a way to photograph those little red cedars that grow up all along the highway, on the scrappy rock hills, when they, these little insistent trees that just, whenever I'm traveling and I drive and I start seeing those little cedar trees I realize I'm home. This is where I live. Like, this is like, and it's like, it's funny because you don't have to go too deep into Kentucky before those stop, or too much in any direction, and I don't see that anymore. So to those are a part of this landscape that I would love to find a way to, like, because I feel a certain way when I see those. I know we've been talking mostly about portraits and making pictures of people, but I used to say to people, what I love to photograph is I love to photograph people in places where people aren't. And that remains true. Like, my personal work often goes to just wandering. I will pick streets. And I don't know that I would say that there's one space, like in our region, that I've like continually resonate with, but I will just pick streets and walk. Like, I've done this with Vine Street. I've done it with State Street in Beekman. I've done it with the whole neighborhood of Walnut Hills, where I will just, Eastern Avenue in the 80s when it was very different. I would just walk. I don't know what I want to photograph, but I want to walk the length of this street and photograph and just be open to whatever's there. And I've never been let down. I mean, you just start scratching at the surface and the world gets pretty interesting.
That might be the best thing you've said all along. You scratch at the surface and the world gets interesting. You have to try things, right? Mm-hmm. You have to go through this world and experience things.
You have to get out of your head, at least, and put some feet to it.
Yeah, what's that mean? Do you get out of your head? That's such an important statement to me. In business, as I help people strive and to achieve things, to take action, what's that mean to you when you say that you got to get out of your head? It was so natural to you saying that.
I spend way too much time, like, thinking of reasons why this won't work, or why I don't feel up to it, or why, but then what's the cliche people say, movement is medicine. I think that I hate saying it because it's so worn out, but it feels so true that like the world is waiting for us to pay attention with our bodies rather than just our heads.
And take action and to move. Mm-hmm. Movement is medicine. Mm-hmm. That's so special. What do you think about in your quiet moments when it's just Michael?
Right now, I'm thinking a lot about attention. Like, where is my attention? That's my most recent. Like, somebody told me, a friend of mine gave me this a question to ask yourself: what's saving your life today? What has saved your life? Well, but what's saving your life today? And maybe that's similar to a question you asked me. Maybe it's what you asked me right now. What am I thinking? But I would say right now, that's what am I paying attention to? That's what I'm thinking.
Do you think we should be intentional about that? Should we be intentional about that thought? What am I paying attention to?
Oh, I believe that very strongly, especially having taught freshmen at UC, and I just saw how much stuff is crying for our attention. Like, what are we giving it to? And the truth is like as animals, we're attracted to things that light up and move. That's the definition of an iPhone, or like, there's movement, these days you can live your whole waking life hitchhiking, just giving your attention to this interest. This caught my eye.
Distracted all the time.
That caught well, that's interesting until the next more interesting thing. And so you're spending your whole life in a way like with your thumb out, like just being carried by what this is more interesting than that last thing I was interested. This is more interesting. And like, in our work and the things we do start to feel like interruptions to, like, we're entitled to these,
Well, we're not entitled to anything.
Yeah. So
at least that's the way I operate. Maybe we are, but I operate the way that I'm not entitled to anything. Yeah. That it's on me. Yeah. And some people will show up for us. Yeah. But if you take responsibility for all the outcomes and all the actions, life turns out to be pretty stinking good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about taking things really serious?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it depends on the person. Maybe there's people like that is their bent to be serious.
Because you take photography really serious.
I'm serious about it. Hopefully there's some joy in it.
That's not, but those are separate. Those can be separate. Yeah. You can find joy. Maybe you get the joy because you take it so serious.
What if I substitute is
care?
Care. Yeah, I think caring is vital.
Depends on the level you care, I guess. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. And it shows.
You care about this at a significantly high level. Yeah. So that's pretty serious to me. Yeah. Now, because we always hear people say, now don't take yourself too serious. Well, when you're doing photography, right?
See, yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm not saying not to enjoy life and not to have some fun and not find humor at moments. But I'm assuming that comedians take their humor very serious.
They care a lot.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we can use care, but I think that it's been very important for me in my life to be very serious about the outcomes I'm trying to achieve. That's no different, I'm assuming, from the outcome that you want to have. You talked about light. You have to be very serious and very attention-oriented. You have to care about the outcome of that photograph so much that you have to pay serious attention to the lighting.
Sure.
So I think we've had a negative relationship and connotation with being serious. Serious, you can get massive satisfaction when you get outcomes that you desired because you took something very serious. I know that doesn't feel good to so many people, but I think it's the right approach. Yeah. It doesn't mean to remove the joy.
Yeah. Right.
You just like care more. You like the word care. Of course, because you grew up in the 70s. Come on, Michael. That's why, right? That's why. Woodstock is in your blood somehow, even though you didn't get to go. Yeah. That was a little bit before your time. Yeah. 2024. So we're going into, I don't know if it's just Midwestern or if it's the rest of the country, but it seems like this is the time in life to reflect, is what it always seems like to me. We're in December. You spend more time around family. It's a time to reflect on all the things we've done. We're reflecting on current times. We're also, I think, envisioning the next year. I don't know why that is. I don't know why we have this 365-day calendar. But what do you hope to accomplish? What's still the hopes? You've done so much. Because I think that's what's wild. You look back and like Colonel Sanders, who started KFC. He started KFC about the age that you are.
I'm in a place of like sort of new discovery.
Reinvention.
And for me, the part that feels most hopeful is going back through like these 40 some years of making pictures and trying to make sense of it. And I still want to make pictures. I've used the metaphor of like, if you have a golden retriever, when he's a puppy, and maybe it's one of these ones that likes to fetch a stick, you can't throw that stick enough for the dog. Like you can't.
Your arm will wear out before they stop.
Yeah. Then that dog gets to be 12, 13 years old if it's still around, and it has to be sort of coaxed. It still loves to chase a stick, but it really has to be, you really got to get off the couch if you want to go chase a stick.
So what are we saying here?
So I'm a little bit like the old
golden retriever.
The old golden retriever. I still, when I get out there and start walking with you, I know I still love making pictures, but I'm not, So when the stick gets thrown, I still love to chase it. But what I am sort of feeling more with that youthful kind of energy towards like, wow, I'd love to make sense. And like you mentioned, the kids, I would love to have a concise thing, like to say to the kids, like, these are the pictures I cared about. Like when I'm told to remember my name,
that's the legacy.
I want you, these are the pictures that I was really grateful to have left.
As we wrap up here, does your, can the work still be done the same, even though there's technology and we have these devices in our hands? Is there still an art that can be appreciated that you can do, or are you doing it just for yourself? Is there a place for this in the economy anymore?
Great question. There's a smaller place for it in the economy.
Like Lyle might still call you for it.
Oh yeah, and I still get when I do shoot. I even shoot even like locally for a magazine here in the area, and they still let me shoot film. And that the end result doesn't probably require that it be shot on film, but they know I love working that way, and so yeah, there is a future in film. And one of the things I do now, and I help run a community darkroom, analog darkroom, and I run the photography program at a place called Manifest Drawing Center, and I teach there. And there is a big interest in film photography, analog photography, and it's maybe kind of like a reaction. The way vinyl has become very popular.
Same thing. I was going to say that.
Yeah.
People are buying vinyl now again.
It's analogous, probably, that people want to have, are longing for like physical interaction with the things they care about. And digital is so advanced and it's so good. Like the phones in your pocket on that there's so much technology. There's so much that is happening. It's like the pictures happen without you actually having to be involved.
I don't know how or why.
Yeah.
And so when I get into a moment and I wanted to do something like this, I'd have no idea how.
Right. So, and I think people long for that. So there'll be a place for it, but just not in the marketplace, less and less.
Yeah.
But in the world, more and more.
So what does Michael do with social media?
I have Instagram, and it's tethered to my Facebook, but I'm not quite active. I will use it to hustle a class I'm teaching or a workshop, but or if one of my kids is doing something. But I use it like a bulletin board. I'm not good at it, I would say. I've got a thing that keeps me from being on it more than 30 minutes. So like it shuts down.
You serious?
Yeah.
What is that? Is it an app? You force it.
Yeah. So
should we all do that?
no, I mean people can do different things, but for me it's like again, like my attention goes to whatever is the bright spinning thing in front of my eye. What was that movie? Jungle Book, and the snake does this thing like where like it, like has tried to hypnotize Mowgli.
It hypnotizes us on social media now. You think it does?
It can. Not everybody, but
I think it steals our attention. I think from being present in a lot of moments.
Yeah.
Yeah. The final thing, when you find yourself in a classroom of students, what are you trying to do? Whether it's at Northern or University of Cincinnati, there's no way over a 16-week course that you could transfer to them everything you know. What are you trying to do there?
Yeah, I am trying to, in my case, I would be there because of photography. That's the given. So in that case, I want them to sort of find out, do they care? Are they serious about that, to use your word? Is photography important enough for them to, and if so, what is it about it? When does your tail start wagging? When do you feel that? And then really dig in there. Start paying attention to what that is. What's at work when you get excited about something. And so I would say that's the big picture. It's like, is there anything here that even like feels like it's going to be important to you?
Helping them figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be a conduit.
Yeah.
To help be their therapist. Thank you for coming in.
You bet.
2025, I can't wait for it. And somehow I'm going to get a look to flip through the pages of this portfolio.
Okay, that's it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.